Hello and welcome everybody to the FDC3 General Meeting. This meeting serves as an update on all the activity in FDC3 over the last, normally quarter. I think in this case it's been a bit longer since we've done one of these, and it coincides with the opening of the adoption vote for FDC3 2.2. We'll just cover the meeting notices. As with all FINOS meetings, we need to follow FINOS's guidelines for running those meetings. We are all subject to the Linux Foundation antitrust policy and the FINOS Community Code of Conduct, as well as all other FINOS policies. And the meeting does involve participation by industry competitors, and it's the intention of FINOS and the Linux Foundation to conduct all of its activities in accordance with applicable antitrust and competition laws. Therefore, we will be adhering to a meeting agenda, and we will not be participating in any activities that are prohibited under applicable US, state, federal, or foreign antitrust and competition laws. This meeting is recorded for distribution, so we do ask that contributions are kept to the Q&A section at the end. We will be distributing the recording. If you're attending in person, please add your name and affiliation to our agenda to help our colleagues at FINOS track engagement. And today's agenda is going to cover a number of announcements, largely from the maintainers. We will be looking at what's new in FDC3 2.2, and at the end of this meeting, as I said, I'll be opening the adoption vote for 2.2, which will be kept open for a couple of weeks. And then we'll be looking ahead to what we would like to address in FDC3 2.3. But it is an open community standard, so if you have more than we talk about today, please do raise issues and get in touch with the FDC3 maintainers, and we can add them in for discussion into the 2.3 scope. And then hopefully we will end with a quick bit of Q&A time, which will not form part of the recording. So to kick us off with the announcements, we have a number of new appointments to the maintainers and editors team. These are important because they keep the standard healthy, and there is a lot of work to do when we are creating additions to it. So one of the most important roles there is the FDC3 editor. We now have two editors in Derek Navavi as our new appointment, who joins Hugh Troger from FactSet, and they are responsible for reviewing additions for quality control, but also as part of our governance to make sure they match the decisions of the standards working group. Welcome to the team, Derek. We also have appointed two new maintainers, the first of which is Lisbetta, who has been a key contributor to a number of different initiatives and has been raising PRs towards the 2.3 scope. She's also going to be talking today about the contribution she's made of a Golang binding for FDC3. So I see you in here, Lisbetta. Would you like to say a very quick hello?
Yeah, hi everyone. Very excited to be a part of the maintainer group, and I have the privilege to contribute some issues. That Golang is the one I'm very excited about to talk today.
Looking forward to that. We'll come back to you in a bit. And we also have Juliana Langston, who joins us from Interop.io, who has again contributed heavily to the FDC3 web discussion group, but has also been helping with those all-important chop wood and carry water tasks in maintaining the project. So Juliana, would you like to say a very quick hello as well?
Hi, I think I've met a lot of people at various FINOS conferences. I've been working on FDC3 for several years now, but with Kris West moving on to NatWest, I have taken over his maintainer role here at Interop.io. And so very excited to keep on working with FDC3. And
we're happy to have you. Thank you both, or all three of you, for your help so far, and we look forward to using your input in the future. We'll talk more about this later, but we are also still recruiting for more maintainers and editors. So if you'd like to get involved, do get in touch with the existing FDC3 maintainers, and we'll talk you through what that means. Okay, so as I mentioned, we are ready to open the vote for the adoption of FDC3 2.2. It's actually been a fairly long run for us, with a huge addition to the standard that we've been working on over the last 21 months since FDC3 2.1. Adoption is via a vote of the FDC3 participants. You need to be registered to vote. You can do that by email to fdc3-participants@finos.org. And to sign up for that, there is a link you can click on in the FDC3 README in GitHub. but feel free also to get in touch via the mailing list or the FDC3-maintainers@finos.org mailing list, and we will help you get that done. Instructions will be in the email I send out shortly to the FDC3 mailing list. The vote will be open from today, the 8th, onwards to the midnight on the 1st of April, when the maintainers will then establish the consensus of the participants is for adoption or rejection of this version. Within scope for 2.2, it is actually our first release of FDC3 under the community spec license. This was adopted some time ago, but this is the first release to come out under that license. We've also updated the FDC3 charter to better represent what we all understand in the documentation as what we all understand as the focus of FDC3, what it's trying to achieve. So there's no real surprises in there. It's incorporating well-known language that we already use. FDC3 for web browsers has had a specification agreed for it, messaging standard, and a large amount of work that Rob Moffat at FINOS has helped us with, or has helped to lead, to implement the client-side portions that enable vendor-agnostic access to a desktop agent. So you can write your app once and have it work in many web-enabled desktop agents, alongside having it work inside the existing container-based or preload desktop agents. We'll talk more about that in a bit. We had the FDC3 NET Binding contributed by Brian at Morgan Stanley. We'll be talking about that in a moment. That has also been around for a little while, but this is the first release with it included as part of the FDC3 standard. And we did some work to reorganize the repository that FDC3 comes in as a mono repo to support all these new things. And we have the usual handful of intent and context updates. You can get a look at the full list of issues by checking out milestone 11 on the 3 GitHub repository. We also have, as we always do, the current draft documentation under the next version of the FDC3 standard. If you go onto the FDC3 website, in the top right-hand corner, there is a selector for version. If you select the next version, you can see all of those things that have been merged and are going into the next release. But as we've already created the release branch, there is a preview of what the site will look like as soon as that is merged, as well as our current changelog that you can review. There are beta versions of the NPM module that will be released after adoption by the maintainers, so you can also go and check that out in your software. And we'll talk a bit more later as to why there are more NPM modules than there used to be. And Rob, would you like to give a quick introduction to OSFF London?
I'll do my best. I think everybody here should know what OSFF London is. FINOS runs two.
No, we don't. Tell us.
I'm going to anyway. Yeah, we run 2 conferences a year, one in London, one in New York. So the London one is in June, as it says on here. The call for papers is currently open. It's closing, I think, tomorrow. So if you have a burning topic you want to talk about, then submit your call for papers to Suite. Otherwise, I hope to see you there. Please register. It's currently free for gold and platinum members of FINOS. Or if you want to have a booth or have a table at the event, or your name in lights above the hoardings, then you talk to us about sponsorship as well. Lots of sponsorship opportunities. And as I'm sure FDC3 will be making a big splash at the conference as it usually does. We're quite a big part of the whole OSFF conference. Obviously, I'm currently working towards a bunch of stuff to talk about with FDC3 at the next OSFF. And I think some of the other people in this call are also planning to do talks there as well. Lots to see.
Indeed, I know a few have been submitted. For our US colleagues, obviously, there is the New York edition, which falls in October or November this year.
October this year.
Okay, so we will see the rest of you there if you don't make it to London. With that, I'm going to turn you back over to Elisabetta for a moment to talk about the FDC3 Go Binding.
Thanks, Kris. Yeah, so why Golang? It's a very fast and performant language. It offers high speed, and it is really good at handling concurrency, which is also helpful with the point number 3, it has microservices, so we can build it very fast. Microservice architecture suited to develop something very small, install, start, test it. It's very simple to learn. The language is very readable, very writable. You can also quickly compile it and start it up on your machine. So at the bottom, you have the issue and the pull request. I'm going to talk a little bit through about the differences between Golang and TypeScript right now. That is really the only thing you need to know in advance before looking at the code, because these are like peculiarities of Golang. So one of the interesting things is the Golang channel definition. In Golang, channels is a communication mechanism, like a pipe in Linux, which is different than the FDC3 channel. So in this specific case, we are mapping Golang channels and TypeScript promises. So wherever you see a channel, that is a substitute for a promise in TypeScript. And from that, there is also a peculiarity of Go is error handling specifically for channels. Channels don't have the built-in error handling, so you can't use it the same way as you do with promises in TypeScript. So that is why instead of getting a result of a certain type back from a function, I created the struct called result, which will have the error and the value of the type that you would normally return from the function. And the error would be the error that could be thrown if the error does occur. So only one of them would be set for a specific result from the function. Another change that we had to make is the context type implementation. For the implementation of various context types in Golang, the base context type will be introduced, and it has the common fields like type, name, and ID. This is a trade-off that was done in order to optimize for JSON creation. There was other ways of creating context types, custom context types, that would make JSON creation much more complicated. So in the next slide, I will talk a little bit about the trade-off. So in order for this to work, we now need to implement an interface of your choosing. It really doesn't have to be Marshall context or any other specific function, but it has to be a context interface, iContext interface with a function that all of your custom contexts are going to have to implement. And then that iContext will be used as a return type from, as you can see here, broadcast or context handler. Again, it will have to implement this Marshall interface. If you have time and you have interest in learning a little bit of Go, please give this pull request on the first slide a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Lizveta. It's a great contribution, a binding for an entire language. We're very keen to find you some reviewers, and this will appear as part of the 2.3 scope for FDC3. So it will be going into the next version after we adopt 2.2. So we're going to take a bit of a deeper look at FDC3 2.2 and specifically FDC3 for the web, so everyone knows what's included in the new scope. One of the first things we did in that 2.2 scope, though, was to update the FDC3 charter. It included a very basic description, but not a very penetrable description of what FDC3 was. And if you asked most long-term participants in the standard, they would have told you what we have effectively changed it to, what we've updated it to, which is to enable applications and financial services workflows to interoperate in a plug-and-play fashion without prior bilateral agreements between app developers, which I think is what most of the maintainers would have told you it was. So there's a little bit more to it than that. Feel free to go and check it out. This was something the Standards Working Group agreed to, I think, about a year ago. We have also included are releasing the FDC3 NET Binding in its first official version of FDC3. And I'll turn you over to Brian for some words on that.
Sure, thank you. So as Kris mentioned earlier, this has been around for some time. Our first release, I think, was along with the 2.0 specification. So while this isn't exactly aligned with 2.2, it makes sense to discuss here, along with the entire refactor for the Mono repo and a significant change on how we're generating documentation. We took the time to add support for general addition of other bindings within the documentation, and .NET just happens to be the first one here. The two major changes you'll see in the documentation website are the supported platform pages. If you were to view that, there is a general introductory section for each language platform that will be supported, which can point you to other resources for that. And when you look through the other API part pages, whenever there's examples for TypeScript or JavaScript where it's showing the declaration and the example usage, that will now be tabbed and you will see the other programming language options that you have available. And the nice thing about DocuSource is if you pick one, it will remember it. So you don't have to keep on changing the .NET if you are a .NET developer. And then just continuing along with me talking about .NET, I went out with little fanfare rather than a bang in December, but we released the 2.1 NuGet packages. Work is now underway for 2.2. So think of it like that whole TikTok release cycle. So we vote in for the new spec. Once that happens, that is aligned with the TypeScript release. And then the work usually begins on the other language bindings because it's just easier to do it that way rather than at the same time. First, I want to just publicly, in front of the whole community, thank Elizaveta for helping out tremendously on the .NET stuff, getting it out the door with reviews, helping out on the documentation. That was extremely appreciated. Thank you. And I just want to extend to everyone else, contributions are always welcome. We're looking for other people to help with maintaining, contributing, whatever you want to do in the .NET space, or really any other programming languages as we add them.
Thank you, Brian. And I think it should be obvious that one of the next things that we ought to be seeing happen here is a Java and a Python binding. We know they exist and we know people are out there using them in their products. It's time for somebody to step forward and help us add those bindings to the FDC3 standard. The maintainers will be happy to spin up and get you some help in bringing that in. But we need somebody to lead the effort. So thank you, Brian, for leading that on .NET and Elizaveta on Golang. Okay, we have a small number of changes to the desktop agent API that are going in 2.2. These have been agreed over the last 18 months or so. One was to add an ability for an application to know that its user channel has been changed. Desktop agents sometimes have channel selectors that are outside the app. They often do. And users are expected to control the channel, but app developers would like to know when that has changed. In developing that, we opted to create an add event listener pattern for FDC3 to allow us to support more events in the future, rather than just this channel change event. However, for this version, it is the only event that you can listen for on the desktop agent itself. However, we have also extended that pattern to private channels, which have some event listeners as well. These were inconsistent with the rest of the API in that they were synchronous functions. The add event listener version is asynchronous and helps us bring FDC3 to a consistent place based on promises in TypeScript and equivalent constructs in other languages. And so we're deprecating the existing on add context listener, on unsubscribe listener, and on disconnect listener in favor of those three events being pushed through add event listener. There is another change of a similar nature, which was the listener unsubscribe function was also synchronous. We have made that async, which is a non-breaking change. So the private channel change is a set of deprecations and an addition, and the listener unsubscribe is simply an addition, as unsubscribe didn't really have a return type first. We've also done the work necessary to bring the conformance definitions into the FDC3 documentation. These have existed in the repository for a few years now, but they have resolved questions on how the API should work for a number of participants. So they have been brought into the documentation and into our versioning process more formally. So you'll now be able to find these directly in the website. And so this is the definition of the cases. There is an external project that implements them as the FDC3 conformance framework. And finally, we have made the decision as a set of maintainers to move the FDC3 NPM modules to ES6. They have always been published as a joint build, a module that contains both CommonJS and ES6 versions. we've decided to focus on ES6 as the modern standard and have provided a separate module for anyone who needs backwards compatibility with CommonJS. Hence, if you have any trouble building the new NPM modules and you're using CommonJS in your build pipeline, try the FDC3 CommonJS module instead. We've done it that way so that if CommonJS falls out of use, we can then retire that support in future and continue forward with the ES modules. We have a couple of small updates on intent and context standards. We didn't do a huge amount on these in 2.2. The first was amongst contacts to break out the FDC3 file attachment context into its own schema. It was originally defined within the FDC3 message schema, but that prevents it being used to compose other schemas, so it was broken out. Some work was contributed by a participant on utility functions to enable you to recognize standardized context. So as an importable util function is standard context, which will give you a Boolean answer as to whether it's one of the standard types or not, and introduced a set of type unions you can use for typing in your own code, and deprecated the existing context types enum that did the same thing but isn't as easy to use in TypeScript as the unions are. And finally, we moved to generating our context documentation from our JSON schemas. This was a big bit of maintenance work, which we had some help from Juan at FINOS on to start us off, but now means that the single source of truth for context is its schema file from which its documentation page is nicely generated. So that makes it easier for people to contribute context. And we've actually been working with participants, for example, in the city-hosted hackathon recently, on systems that can help you generate the schema files or edit schema files ready for contribution. So the new context pages look a bit like this. They link out to the schema and do a nicer job of rendering the properties and a set of examples for each schema type, making it all easier to consume and meaning we don't have to manually maintain these pages anymore. On the intents front, we had one new intent, which was create or update profile, something that had been sitting on the to-do list for a long time. It's to be used when the user needs to create a new contact or organization in an app, or update an existing one with the new data that they've got. So they can use the same intent for that. The app will receive it and can decide whether to create or update an existing record. We also have the same set of changes as we had for context to enable you to recognize standardized intents. There's a nice utility function for that, and a new union type standard intent, which replaces the existing intents enum, which is deprecated. Okay, I will move us on to FDC3 for web browsers, which is something we've been working on for more than 18 months as a community. It's had contributions from a very large number of people and firms towards it, and no small amount of work from FINOS and the FDC3 maintainers to deliver it. There already exist in the market a number of vendor products that offer FDC3 and other interop APIs in web browsers, which I'll clarify by saying traditionally FDC3 was delivered in container products, which are able to do some things that you can't do in browsers due to their security model. And that leads to a bit of a catch here. The desktop agents running in web browsers can't inject the FDC3 API in the same way that the containers can to make it available for applications. And that means apps have to import a vendor library, which means they can only support specific desktop agents or do a whole load of work to support detection of the agent type and then using the right library. Nevertheless, that is complicated and not what we're looking for in the standard, and to make it easy for apps to write once and run anywhere on any of the standardized agents, which is one of the main reasons for having the standard in the first place. So this tends not to be a problem if you're building an in-house desktop or with your own apps, but if you're building a platform, something that you're going to publish elsewhere, or something that you're going to import lots of third-party apps into, it gets very complicated, and we lose the benefit of having the standard by forcing lots of individual integrations. Hence, we've come up with a solution, which is basically to build a wire protocol for FDC3 to enable it to be implemented in a web browser. with some library support. That has come in two parts. We have had to create a connection protocol to help you establish a connection in a standardized way to a desktop agent, and a communication protocol which defines all the interactions with that desktop agent that happen over the top of the connection. It's an intended division such that we could implement different connection protocols for different languages and reuse the communication protocol so that we could do similar things, for example, in .NET or in Java, and have a common library that could connect to different desktop agents and communicate with that common communication protocol. This has all been implemented in the FDC3 NPM module, or modules, I should say, via a new get agent function, which allows you to connect to either a desktop agent in a container or a desktop agent running in the browser, and is intended to be a non-breaking change. So apps that are working today can continue connecting to their containers, or they can have this swapped in so that they can connect in either a browser or a container. When connecting in a browser, it will not return the desktop agent's API implementation directly, but rather a proxy to it that will handle communication back towards that desktop agent on its behalf. And we have noted along the way that working in the browser requires a bit better system for app identity validation, confirming the app is what it says it is, because the desktop agent may not know that in advance, particularly if you've got 2 or 3 connecting at once. It doesn't have a way under the existing 2.1 standard to know what the app is, but does in 2.2. And we also had to add some handling for intent resolver and channel selector UIs, usually handled by the desktop agent, but are now injectable as well as an option. So they can be injected by the desktop agent through this client support and appear within the window. The get agent function, as I said, works with both the existing preload style agents and the new web-based agents. So it can pick up a desktop agent API from window.fdc3, as is used in the preload agents and all previous versions of FDC3, or it can communicate with the desktop agent in a parent window or frame via post message. So this is the new recommended way that you should get hold of a desktop agent reference in any web application, regardless of what type of platform you're running on, so you can write once and run anywhere. What that really means is you've replaced the existing ready pattern that applications have used for some time. They look for window.fdc3, and if it's there, do stuff, otherwise they wait for an event. That is now all handled internally by this get agent function, which will also handle the steps for connecting in a browser and will work out which it needs to do. I'm not going to go into all the detail on the options that are available, but there is more in the 2.2 preview that you can check out. And then we also have, based on a contribution from, again, significant contribution from FINOS via Rob Moffat and from City via Alexandru Dumitru, to refactor the FDC3 repository to handle some of its growth over the last few years, and specifically in this standards version. The repository does a bunch of different things. It handles our governance, it handles our website for the standard documentation, contains TypeScript API definitions, schema definitions for various APIs, and utility applications. So it was already a not very formal monorepo in that it contained multiple projects. It now is a formal repository, monorepo, that has been broken up into a set of packages that are easier to test and maintain, and ultimately get rolled up into an FDC3 NPM module for backwards compatibility. So we have packages based on the FDC3 standard, the agent proxy implementation that handles the desktop communication protocol, the get agent function itself, which allows you to get a desktop agent and then sets up a proxy to talk to it, package of schemas for covering the AppD, the bridging API, and FDC3 for web message schemas, a separate schema package in FDC3 context, which handles the context types, and then, as I said, the FDC3 package rolls all of those up into a build, replicating the existing module, and we have the new alternative one containing the CommonJS build in FDC3 CommonJS. And just the last word on this, a lot of work went into creating tests. I think the numbers on this slide aren't actually right, but Rob Moffat's masterminded creating a large number of tests confirming that our implementations are working as expected and to ease future maintenance of all this new software. So thank you again for that contribution, Rob. And with that, I'm going to turn us over, hopefully, for a couple of demos of FDC3 for the web in action. We only have a few minutes each for these. Rob, would you like to kick us off with a short show of the reference implementation? Or
so yeah, just on what Kris was talking about there with the mono repo structure, we now have like coverage reporting built into our PRs, and we have GitHub Actions running all these tests. So I think it runs them various different ways, like on Windows and Linux builds. So hence there's 504 different permutations of tests being run. And we have code coverage as well now, which is pretty cool. It's nice to see that going up when you do a new PR. We also have our OpenSSF best practices badge. Because we have all these tests now, we actually we have a testing policy. We can pass this OpenSSF best practices, which is something we've been trying to get for quite a while. Okay, so yes, I've done Kris and I both at the OSFF last October, November, did a presentation on FDC3 for the web and FDC3 2.2. And it was about an hour long. And this is on the community section of the FDC3 website. So if you want the full unexpurgated version, that's where to go. Go and check that out. This also contains things like Juliana's presentation as well. And where is it?
Rob?
Yep.
Hey, Rob, I have a quick question. So is this something that is already getting leveraged in any organization for POC testing? I was wondering, is it a good stage to start doing POCs internally?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I think we have quite a lot of people from Morgan Stanley on the call today who are really using this in anger at the moment. And we also have quite a lot of people here from Interop.io who are building their next version of IO Connect, I'm going to say it's called. Is that right, Juliana?
yeah, we should have a chance to see that in just a moment. I'm going to have to move us along slightly though, as we're a little compressed on time.
Kris. Okay, yeah, so I'm not going to take too long over this today because reasons, but this is our demo desktop agent that we built in order to build all these tests and to prove all this stuff worked. We built a demo desktop agent. And this exists inside that mono repo structure as well. So you can check out the FDC3 repo, you can type npm run dev, and this will pop into life, and you can head over on your local host and check this out. I've shown this demo before. I'm going to just show quickly like some broadcasting. So if I've got a couple of apps here, one that broadcasts and one that receives. So if I press this button here, you can see this app running in this little iframe is now broadcasting, and this is running in this iframe. And the demo desktop agent also provides this channel selector, this red icon in the bottom corner, so I can change channels here. When I do that, it stops receiving because they're on different user channels now. But if I resynchronize them, you can see it starts receiving them again. So this is all stuff we showed off all of last year. This was going on. It's also got things like the FDC3 workbench in here as well. I can just quickly give a demo of raising, and can I? Let's do it this way. If I open this in a tab, so tabs work as well, and I can do a raise intent. So let's try raising an instrument, and I'm going to use the view quote application. You can see another tab opens, and it receives that Microsoft quote. All of this works. This has all been around for quite some time. The other thing I showed off in New York last year was Sail, which is our kind of like our demo implementation of FDC3, like our FINOS desktop agent. And I actually have this deployed now at sail.fdc3.finos.org. So hopefully we can start to show this to people and give them an idea of what FDC3 is. And I'll let people go and play with this. There are a few little bugs in this, but generally speaking, it works. So you can, again, you can start things like the FDC3 workbench. Brilliant. Let's try that again. You can start the FDC3 workbench. Hey, and I can start a bunch of other apps. So like here's a trading view application, and let's try raising an intent. So if I go raise an intent, I'll raise it to that app. There we go. So it raises it over there. And yeah, you can have a play with this. You can change the directories, you can add new app directories, and you can change the tabs as well. So you can have different tabs on the left hand side. These correspond to user channels. So that's done as well. But this is all using FDC3 for web and this new get agent function that Kris has specified in over the last year. So this is all coming together quite nicely. As I say, there's a few little implementation issues we've got to iron out, but otherwise it's looking fairly nice as a way to on-ramp people onto understanding FDC3.
Thank you, Rob. And yes, it should be obvious, it will provide a great sandbox environment for people getting started in FDC3 to do things in future. Juliana, I'll turn it over to you for a quick demo of a commercial implementation that's starting to use this.
Absolutely. Okay, so here I've threw together a quick little app that just does some basic stuff with FDC3 just to make sure that one single app can work in every single different platform we can throw it in. This application you can see right here just has view news and view context, but we have FDC3 symbol right here with a strike through. This indicates it is not existing in a desktop agent, and this app is just in a browser. That's pretty much what I would expect. What happens if I put it in a desktop agent? So here is the interoperability sandbox, and I'm just going to go ahead and grab my get agent test that I've added. It pops up, we see the strike through, and then after a second, the handshake completes and that we exist within a desktop agent. Of course, that's all well and good, but can we actually do things with it? So I'm going to pull this over to the side. FDC3 Workbench is coming up, and let's just go ahead and do a broadcast context. So currently my app is on channel 1, so let me go ahead and join channel 1, and then I'm just going to broadcast Apple, and there you go, it was received. I'll broadcast Microsoft, it was received. I can also raise an intent. Let me just listen for an intent. I'll listen for view news because that's what I got over here. View news, add listener, and then this is where information on the intent will be. I click the button and the information appears. So voila, FDC3, it all works just fine. And this is all within the web. Obviously, if you have an app, we want that app to be able to run anywhere, whether it's in the browser or even on the desktop. If you want, I can also show you that it works just fine on IO desktop as well. It works just fine on Rob's demo application, which I have over here. Every single thing I've been able to put this kind of app in, the Get Agent protocol works just fine. Everything runs, and there's no change in the code between one place to another. It is truly write once, run anywhere, and I'm really excited that we support it.
Thank you, Juliana. That's great stuff. Is there somewhere people can check this out? Will it be available online?
This particular demo I have not made so that I can share it with anyone, but I can absolutely do a write-up for anyone who wants to go through and just try it out themselves. I just threw Vite together and a couple lines of code, so I can just send out some kind of document so anyone else can do the same thing.
Awesome. I look forward to seeing it, perhaps at OSFF. And with that, we have covered essentially what's changing in FDC3 2.2. As should be obvious, FDC3 for Web was a big iceberg. There's a lot going on under the surface we've all been working on for the last 21 months, but we are confident it is ready to go as the FDC3 maintainers, and you'll be able to vote on the adoption shortly. And with that, I will move us back to looking ahead to FDC3 2.3 and what we're going to be doing next. Okay, the 2.3 scope has a number of different open issues already, but we're going to start in a moment with the identity and security features, which I think Paul from Morgan Stanley is going to talk to us about on behalf of that discussion group. We will also be giving you some details of the discussion groups that will be working on the topics so that you can go and get involved there and help make it fit for your use cases. But some of the other things we have on the scope include the ability to add multiple apps within a single web page. I think you probably saw that in Rob's demo, but that's based on iframes, and there are a number of participants that want to be able to deliver lots of widgets within the same DOM, and that needs some additions both for containers to support and browsers to support. So we'll be doing a bit more work on that. We've had several people ask for the ability to clear context on a channel, which is not something you can do satisfactorily with FDC3 channels at the moment. So that needs an addition. We have a couple of different topics that are touching on adding additional metadata around context messages. For example, to implement traceability, where multiple FDC3 API calls relate to a single interaction and people want to be able to trace across the API calls, possibly across multiple applications as part of their reporting. That needs some metadata. as does some of the work of the identity and security group. So there are a couple of proposals out there for this, which will allow us to deliver additional metadata alongside context or an intent and context message. We have also got a maintenance task to do in that we want to rationalize some of the descriptions of the conformance tests, introduce a bit more standard language. And I think FINOS also have some goals there on the implementation front. So we will be looking for contributors both towards the tests and the implementation of the tests. And the Golang binding we mentioned earlier is also pretty much ready for adoption in 2.3, but we need to give some time for people to review and feedback on it. And as I said earlier, we are eagerly anticipating somebody stepping forward to contribute either a Java or Python binding. We know they exist, we know they are in production use, and it is time to get them into the standard. You can check out all the things that are raised, including a few minor issues I didn't include in this slide, in the 2.3 candidates milestone, which you can find in our GitHub repository. But you can also, and now is exactly the right time, to raise issues for anything that you want to discuss, change, or add on to in FDC3 2.3. So simply head on over there, raise an issue, and I or one of the other maintainers will navigate it into a discussion group or standards working group meeting to work on. So with that, I am going to hand you over to Paul to give us a quick introduction to what the Identity and Security Group is doing and how it enables some more transactional use cases for FDC3.
Thanks again for introducing me, Kris. What I wanted to do before we get started on what we've been talking about in the Identity and Security Working Group is talk a bit about why FDC3 exists and what value it has to those that use them. So when we have many apps that we want to work together, we want a kind of seamless workflow between them. And what we want is to have those apps that are completely independently created, have different functionality, but they want to coexist on the user's desktop and provide a kind of series of functions and allow tasks to be done in sequence. We want them to be able to collaborate without them knowing what the other apps do and necessarily what they support. So this desktop agent brings them together and allows them to communicate in this loosely coupled way. So A can talk to D, C can talk to B, it can invoke certain events, it can invoke certain interactions that will allow that kind of sequence of tasks to be done. So if we bring them together, we have an app directory which defines what they are, then they can participate in this set of interactions without knowing what those other applications do. And we can do that with the notion of intents, which is a way to describe a common language for how these applications can invoke a certain action and use those contexts to describe what the action should be working on the data. So now, as we've built out this idea of FDC3 to be an open standard, one of the challenges we have is, well, we're in the finance industry. We need security to be able to ensure that those interactions are, when we're talking about doing something that's more sensitive in nature, protected in some way. We're satisfying our cyber risk obligations and constraints that most of us in the finance industry are put upon. So what we want to do is make sure that when we're having communications with those other apps, that we know who we're talking to. If we want to say, I want to book a trade, I want to find out what this quote for this stock is. And in order to have that confidence, we need to do some of the things that we typically do in the web world, SSL and app identity, where on a browser, you're looking at google.com because it's got a security lock on it with a certificate talking about that it is actually Google. We need to do that kind of similar validation of identity. When we're talking about the multiple apps collaborating, we need to have app identity solved for. We need to have app D knowing that app A is Morgan Stanley and D is BlackRock, and they are actually meant to be having a conversation with one another. And there is the D does know it for definite. It's proven that it is coming from A. So we need that identity validation to be done. We also want to make sure that when we're sending the information across this untrusted desktop agent and in a browser, it's a hostile environment, that that information that we're sending between those two parties is protected. So we need to introduce encryption again, similar to the SSL between a client and a server. We want to go between two applications that might not have a server involved. So we need to protect that in some way. So what we've been doing in the Identity and Security Working Group is solving for that first two requirements, the need for some signed intents, so the need for knowing that it did come from Morgan Stanley, as well as being able to encrypt those messages that go between the apps. And now we're now moving on to a different type of identity that we want to support within the FDC3 standard for user identity, knowing that it was Paul Goldsmith that had originally requested the trade, and then maybe Paul Goldsmith is wanting to do something in the other app, and we want to have the same Paul Goldsmith be registered and be booking that trade. Or perhaps there is an opportunity for us to have a Paul Goldsmith be sending the intent, but then another identity, another person, Kris West, be receiving that request for the quote, and then we can have the confidence that it was Kris West who gave me that quote when that message is returned. So that's something we're exploring a bit now in this security identity working group.
Fantastic explanation. Thank you very much, Paul. Given that there's all that interesting stuff going on, we want to spend just a few minutes on how you can get involved. There are a few different levels of that. One of the most important ones is becoming an official participant, editor, or maintainer of the FDC3 standard. Now, FDC3 has traditionally received a lot of support from FINOS to do what it does, but open source projects are to be staffed and run by their participants, their members and maintainers, and we have a need to recruit more. Participants first are those people raising issues, coming to meetings to discuss things, raising PRs. Any open standard needs its participants to stay healthy, stay relevant, and stay addressing the needs of its constituency. But we also need editors to review those PRs for quality and to ensure they match the decisions of the standard working group, a governance role. As I mentioned earlier, we now have 2 editors. We need at least a third to share the work out, keep it at a reasonable level. We are also in need of maintainers who do a number of different things. The most obvious, what I'm doing now, is an organizing activity, setting up and chairing a meeting, but we also have people we need people for governance roles and straight up maintenance of the project infrastructure, code, documentation, and the like. There is a lot to do. There are a lot of roles within the maintainers team, and we are very keen to appoint more maintainers. So if your firm makes significant use of FDC3 or benefits from it in some way, then we would highly encourage you to put forward somebody, firstly as a participant, and then as an editor or maintainer of the standard. Even if they're new to it, but you think they've got time to contribute, the maintainers will be happy to work with you to get somebody new started and recruited into a role. So please do get in touch with us at FDC3-maintainers@finos.org or through our colleagues at FINOS, and let us know that you could get involved and would like some help getting started. You can also check out the FDC3 README for what it means to be a participant, editor, or maintainer. Now, as for that participation, a lot of it happens through our meetings. We do support everything asynchronously as well, so you can just raise an issue and work with us there. But if you'd like to come to a meeting, the next few are up on this slide. I'll show you some QR codes for those in just a second. But the upshot is they are on Thursdays, and we may adjust the timings of them in a month or so's time to go for a consistent start time on a weekly basis across the meetings. So look for an update there and check it out in the FINOS community calendar, where you can now add yourself to the invites for meetings. So find the meeting, click on it, and there is a form where you can get yourself added to its invites so you get a reminder every month. If you want to join one of those meetings, here are a set of QR codes that will take you to those community calendar pages. To add them, to add yourself to them, I will copy what I saw Peter doing the other day, which is to talk about this for a few seconds more, so you've got time to capture those. But don't worry if you miss them, the FINOS community calendar has links to all of them. I'll try and throw these up again at the end. And in case you missed it and want to grab it again, here are the registration and sponsorship links for OSFF. There will be FDC3 activities at the conference. There will be presentations on the topic, and it's also just a great opportunity to get together with your peers, network, and discuss the things that you're interested in, perhaps scheme future additions to the standard. So hopefully we will see you there on June the 20th.